The time is now still 6:32. It's December 16th, 2025. This is the Police Planning Committee meeting. Thank you, Chris, for chairing last week in my absence. I appreciate that. So we'll jump right back in. You have in your email the minutes from the first three meetings. I'm sorry if I missed it in the recording from last time, but just thumbs up that these look okay. They're going to be posted on the website if they look okay. As notes, not as minutes, because we're not a voting body, but did anyone have any changes or additions, subtractions to those? Okay, great. Then moving into the proposed agenda, we'll start with just an update from Rich on benchmarking in municipal case studies. Just summarizing, he did a PowerPoint presentation 2 meetings ago, and then a narrative presentation last time. I think this subcommittee has done an excellent job setting the stage of what policing in our area and how Yardley Borough currently stacks up against them. I think they're pretty much wrapping their work, but they did want to make contact with Newtown Borough and New Britain. They have not done that as of today. We're not able to make contact. So my question for the committee is, does anyone have direct ties there with their government or their police department that we could try to get the information that we need from there? Paula, any? Okay. All right, great. So can you work with Rich? And I think, Dan, you had questions from what I understand, very specific questions for Newtown, right?
Yep. Yeah, we're good. I'll just do our update since you asked me.
Sure.
We've begun scheduling the meetings. We have a meeting scheduled with Chief Kelly. We wanted to start with the chief first as the closest one. We're going to do that one in person instead of like a 30-minute Zoom. And the rest are progressing as we try and wrangle people to get their time.
What has the comfort level been with those meetings? Have people been receptive to talking?
We haven't even started the meeting.
Well, I mean, like reaching out and saying, hey, we want to talk? Great.
Yeah, it's just people's schedules, like the chief, right?
hard time
Next
of year.
week, he's off every day except for Monday, so we're luckily able to get him on Monday to talk with us.
Okay, so if you have any questions that you'd like as part of the conversation that Rich is having around outsourcing and then becoming independent again, can you send those to Paula? And she'll make sure that Rich asks those as well, just so we're not going back to our contacts time and time again. That would be great. Does anyone have any questions that will be recorded and passed back? I'll do minutes for tonight since Rich isn't here. Back to Rich on benchmarking and municipal case studies. Does everyone agree that we're kind of at a good place with that? We understand how the EIT plays in other municipalities. We understand those who have outsourced, those who have had considered outsourcing. From his presentation, are there any outstanding questions in that area of comparing?
I had a question. First of all, this is really good work. People who are actually doing the work.
Yes.
So 2 thumbs up.
Can you turn your mic?
Sorry, not a critique. But I did have a couple of questions. The first is, we have looked at for each municipality whether their sort of positive, negative is or isn't an EIT. But it feels like the EIT is only interpretable in the context of whether it is or isn't being shared with the school districts. I think someone had said that it mattered whether there was or wasn't a school district sharing in that. And it also can only be interpreted in the context of what sort of millage the property tax rate is in that particular municipality, because it can be higher or lower, obviously, in different places. So I would guess, and I'm speaking for myself now, this is not an analytical conclusion, that it's the overall tax burden that matters, not just one piece of it.
So last time we considered this, Ori, jump in if I'm wrong. I don't want to get too in the EIT, rabbit hole, because it can go on and on forever. But I think folks were against it for a lot of reasons. But one of them was it's not like a millage because it's variable. So somebody like a real estate agent who makes a lot one year and might not make a lot the next year is, how does the municipality budget for that? And how does the person budget for, that increase and decrease in what they're giving to the borough? So I think that was one of the major things I heard during the hours and hours of public comment on EIT. Anything else you'd add to that? When the question is it the overall tax burden?
I think that Rich's work covered a little bit of that when he talked about the overall collection and the populations of the borough and but I think what you're saying, and obviously this would be like down the road if if the decision was made to start looking into that, you'd have to look at where does the millage fit in with the variable part, which is the EIT part. And I think maybe it was less millage. You would think there's less millage if there's a percentage because, you don't need to collect as much from that. But the key is that the organization, the state, Keystone is it, the one that does all of the tax collections, this was last done like 10 years ago or so. They must have a lot more information now than they had then. And since there's only a few, areas left that haven't done it, I'm guessing last time they had pretty good data. Now they would have even better data of what we could collect if we did do an EIT. And then we'd have to look at that and look at the millage and say, okay, if we did an EIT, is it 1% or is it less? If we collected this much in totality, what could we reduce the millage by? And I know, like, from my perspective, I'd be looking at, like, it's not as simple as just EIT. It's like EIT, oh, you only need this much to cover police, this, that, and now you can take the millage down. So I think it is a totality, but we may be a little bit on the tangent side now.
I very much appreciate the comments, not trying to get into that discussion.
Yeah.
Because this committee's purview is not
Right.
directly about that. But one of the things we were discussing in the context of each municipality that has been contacted
Yeah.
is do you or don't you have an EIT? But we haven't also been gathering data about their millage.
Yeah, and that's very easy to pull. So that data point at the next meeting, that would be easy for us to report back in. Anything else for benchmarking and municipal case studies that we can assign to Rich before our next meeting? Any other questions we have in that area?
It's not a Rich question, but it's more of a Dan question, I think.
Sure.
And everything you've done has been great. You're setting up the right meetings, but just want to make sure that in the context of those conversations, because it's kind of hard to go back to the well, it's so hard to get time, that you're thinking about a broad range of options in those discussions. And it's not, well, I know we've talked about it here, so it's probably obvious, but we certainly don't want it to be a binary kind of discussion about sort of all in or not in at all. We want all the various sort of possibilities to be on the table.
Yeah, I mean, we have questions about what kinds of service, levels of service, even specifically like, having officers full-time in the borough patrolling.
Yep.
All those types of questions are definitely on our minds and in our questions that we're going to be talking about for sure.
For sure, all of that.
Yeah.
But even things like, what if we were to engage you only for some things? Could you help us with
As opposed to part-time, or you mean just like the detective work versus the?
detective work, or can you supply back office services? Do you have, 24/7 stuff that would unburden our people?
Yeah.
So that maybe we would need a few less people. Because as we discussed, our costs are driven primarily by the personnel. And if people are doing tasks that they might be overqualified for essentially.
Yep. So more like non-police portions of the police.
I'm making this
Can I
up.
jump in here? I think, like, for example, and, maybe someone more knowledgeable than me in how things work should chime in, but when you have a larger department and you have an officer involved in some incident, they have resources. They do a certain amount of work on that and they can pass it off, right? Whoever they're passing it off to wasn't involved in that incident. So presumably, if Yardley had a deal with another municipality, we could pass it off to them to do that part. Because it's the same as passing it off to if we had a bigger department. But I don't know enough to know what that part looks like. But maybe that's an area that would require less personnel, because then that puts our officer as being available back on the street to continue
Yep, I
patrol.
understand.
And I'm just bringing this up, not to presuppose a conclusion, but just to make sure that we discuss all the, creative possibilities that might occur to someone who did have expertise.
Got it?
Is that a need of our police from your perspective?
Like, in terms of like criminal investigations, like, I mean, the way a lot of large departments work is that they'll have like, patrol officers.
Oh, can he have a mic, please?
A duet?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of larger departments will have, a detective division, and the patrol officer responds to the call, makes the arrest, and then fills out some kind of report, and then the rest of the legwork of the investigation is done by detectives. But I mean, we're small enough that we don't have that. I'm not sure, when it comes to like a criminal investigation, I'm not sure what that would even look like. I mean, with sometimes for, our bigger, more serious cases, we will call in county detectives to assist with the investigation and so on. But I'm not even sure what that would look like, handing that off to another agency, you know what I mean? If it's just sort of the more mundane things, minor fender bender traffic accidents, things that aren't really criminal investigations, and it's just a matter of having, a secretary of some kind or something that's doing kind of basic paperwork, then I could see that working in-house, but I'm not sure what it would look like having
Can you see that working in-house to a point where the person would have work and it would be helpful to our officers?
potentially, I mean, that might be worth discussing. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say that's a high priority, but I mean, I don't want to take it off the table as an option if it could be potentially helpful, so.
Yeah, and that was actually one of the things that I was kicking around, which subcommittee it would fit with. But there were things when Ori and I met with the police, or I don't remember when that was, August maybe, that they brought up as ideas, collectively buying cars and guns, collectively bargaining insurance coverage, administrative. I understand staffing's 80% and all of these other things are only 20%, but I think finding $15,000 of savings is finding $15,000 of savings. That's money that we can put towards promoting officers or towards, raises for our officers. So I think it's about trying to flatten that increase that we're seeing in those projections you did. It's not about getting rid of the increases. It's about, trying to dampen them a little bit. So I would still like to look into those, and I didn't know if outside of EIT and looking at what other municipalities are doing with outsourcing or not outsourcing, is there also room to look at comparing those creative solutions with what other municipalities have done? I don't know if that data is available or we'd also have to interview, but does that make sense to assign that to that subcommittee? Are we interested in looking into those things?
I think we should totally look at anything that could, as they used to say with healthcare, that can bend the curve. Again, there will be increases, and that's okay. Matter of fact, we may want to invest in things, like I mentioned last time, that would help us to attract and retain talent. It's important to have good people that are appropriately compensated, but we have to bend the curve in some way. And I know I appreciate actually the comments that are specific to detective work or to, fender benders or other stuff, but I guess the underlying thing to do is to see if there are economies of scale that a knowledgeable person might be able to recognize that could benefit us by leveraging the resources of a larger infrastructure.
We can ask those questions. Dan and I can definitely ask those questions.
Okay, yeah, and I would say for Rich, and maybe I can, and tag along too, because I've already heard some of this when I met with maybe meeting with Chief Golden, you, Corporal Clark, and maybe if any of the other officers want to join and just talk about the day-to-day, where are you spending a lot of your time? Is there anything that you're like, I don't really, want to spend time on this, and we could maybe think about those things. Do you think that would be fruitful? Or would that be the best way to look at these?
Yeah, I mean, that could be helpful. I mean, I'm sure myself and other officers would be willing to have that conversation.
Okay.
Like, I'm just thinking, like, what would be a total win is if we identified economies of scale areas, back office, that not only maybe saved a little money, but also gave you access to more resources than you currently have if you need them. Mm-hmm. Because we have that limitation of just simply, we're so small. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how much you need that. But that's, in my mind, it's like, wow, that could actually be really helpful to you.
Yeah.
I agree completely. I would add that a lot of the public comments that we heard, I think were focused on the sort of front-facing aspects of the department, and people value that. You don't hear a lot of comments about backroom stuff. And so that may be an area of opportunity to identify leverage that is not as sensitive or if not as important to the residents of the borough.
Dan, do you feel like you're clear on how to ask those things? Perfect, awesome. Okay, anything else for this benchmarking? Otherwise, we'll move on to community engagement. Appreciated the feedback, Rami, last meeting about wanting to tweak the questions, just looking for a little more guidance. So just a reminder on the purpose of this, if you could put up the survey questions, please. Thank you. So we're, a couple months into our process now, but we wanted to take a early stage pulse poll from residents on their feelings about the police force and what they're comfortable with, changes being made, if any. So and then we would do another one of these midpoint and another one of these kind of right around when we're thinking we have feedback to pass back to council to see how the residents are feeling about that. So yeah, open to any changes anyone has. So this first section just gives us context about the resident who's responding, since it will be anonymous. Sure.
I would say not only, have you regularly interact, have you ever had to call for a situation or something of that nature? Because they're interacting, just saying hi to the cops is one thing, but, all of a sudden, if, my mother-in-law locked herself out of the house and there's some boiling on the, boiling pot, and they have to open the door, that's a little bit more involved, or even maybe something, since we've had so many high water events, to have a question related to that, and because it's not just Yardley PD that's involved here. There are, the county municipality, or the county REACT group, or whatever they're called now, has always been involved. And, I mean, they've even had National Guard here and things. But there's always that transition to, talk with, or work with, or need them.
Sure, got it, Chuck, yep.
And one other thing regarding the conversation with the detectives and everything, take into account that detectives typically get paid more than regular officers. So although using other municipality services, it might come at a higher cost.
Could be.
Thank you. Just to summarize for folks who might be listening, a resident in the audience said that, breaking out the interactions into more specifics, was it a calls for service? Was it a hey on the street? And then also considering in, outsourcing potentially detective services, that a detective is paid higher than potentially the officer that is responding to the investigation. So thank you for those.
I have a section 2.
Section
Are you
2,
taking
okay.
section 2 feedback yet?
Nope.
First, thanks for putting these together.
Section 1.
Oh, back to section 1?
Go ahead, go back to section 1. Sorry, folks.
Sure. No, I don't mean to move us along.
All right, Dan first.
Just for number 5, I'd rather actually just see the reports from the tax collecting service than, you're only going to get a portion of the people who are paying the EIT are responding to this survey, whereas if we just get the data from the tax service, we'll know everybody, or in general, what those numbers are.
Does that include out of state though?
We're out of, you mean out of district, like?
Yeah. Well, I guess it wouldn't matter
No,
if
I
they
think-
paid it
I
to
think-
the New York one.
Oh, yeah. I don't
It
know
would
how
just
that
be-
works.
I don't know.
But we want to know,
It seemed like the data she had didn't seem complete to me though, so that's why I had it in there, but I can take it out.
we
Well,
want
you
to
can leave
know.
it in
that
there.
the
I
key-
just
the key
would rather
question-
see that number than
Yes.
the reported.
Or
The
compare
key
them, that would
question
be
we need to
interesting.
get, which I agree
Yeah.
with you, would be much more accurate from a report, is how many people are already paying an EIT to another that's going somewhere else?
Another
That we would
Pennsylvania
be,
municipality.
yeah, so they're not like if you pay it to Newtown.
Okay, so we should just add Pennsylvania to there.
Out of state, well, if
Do
you.
you currently
I don't
pay
think
an
if you
earned
paid
income
in
tax
New
to
Jersey-
another PA municipality?
It's-
I will data check that where it would, where it would come home. I think it's only PA. Make sure, confirm that, and then I'll change that one. That's a great point. PA municipality. Okay. Anything else for this page, Rami?
Yeah, so a couple of kind of general comments. The first is, I think we have to be really clear that this is a non-random sample that is being drawn. So there's no reason to believe it will be representative of the community as a whole, because your respondents probably won't look like your non-respondents.
Right.
You also don't know if each respondent is representing a household or an individual, family of 6 or resident of 1. And, I guess I don't know exactly how important that is, but I know that some of the numbers I produced were based on number of households in the borough, and some were based on number of individuals in the borough for average cost. So we don't know what that is here.
Yeah.
The other general comment I'd make is that we shouldn't ask any question that we can't use, that's not going to inform our decision-making.
Okay.
Because you want this to be as short as possible to get the best general survey methodology kind of issue. The shorter it is, the more likely you are to get good responses.
Okay, so feel free to say which ones you might strike. What about in this context section, too long?
Well, I don't know how you plan, the very first question, how long have you lived here? How are we going to use that information?
I think it's important in context of like, have you known the police department over many different chiefs, many different staffing plans? Because we used to have a police force that, only had 1 full-timer, and now we have 5. Like, it's nice to know if they've seen all of those, because their data will be, their responses will be guided by that.
Just to speak to what you're saying about, because you're right about whenever you do this kind of thing, you're not getting a random sample. And that's, it's one channel of information, but it's not the conclusive result. But I think what's helpful, I've mentioned this before, we've looked at surveying people, is that we have a small enough people, small enough basket of people that we can actually read the responses. So if you see a person's been living here 20 years, it just kind of makes you think, okay, this is somebody who's really familiar with our community. And I think that's kind of like how that would inform me. I would look at that differently than somebody who just moved in, for like a year or something.
Yeah, David?
Thank you for taking my question. When I am designing, doing data collection, part of what I'm concerned about is either the optics or the psychology of it. In number 5, the question says, do you currently pay earned income tax to another municipality? Whether that's Pennsylvania or whatever, that doesn't matter. And maybe I'm not overreacting, but I'm just asking because should the person who's taking the questionnaire, would that influence them in any way in how they're going to finish answering the question and/or have a concern that this board might be interested in, and not that I'm against or for, proposing an EIT? Is that a fair question?
That's a good point. Given Dan's comment that we have possibly incomplete, but we have data otherwise, we can take that one out.
Yeah, I think we should take it out.
Yep, that's a great point.
I don't think anybody's wanted in there.
All right, next page.
So can I give one feedback here?
You can give 3 feedbacks if you want.
I just have one. On number 7, I looked at this, I had to read it twice, because I remember going door to door and talking to people, and just generally talking to people in town. And one of the top things I hear about what they want from police is traffic stops, speeding, traffic calming, stop signs, and stopping. If you look at our police records, most of the arrests are, we spotted some erratic driving or something else going on. And that needs to translate to exact hours so that it could be compared with what we're currently doing. Because if another municipality said, yeah, we'll do Yardley instead of you locally, and we didn't get hour for hour, what would we get? I think that one matters a lot to people, so I'd like that to be listed. I don't think it's the same as visible patrol presence.
Traffic
It's
stop.
traffic stops.
Traffic calming, yep.
Traffic stops, calming, speeding, something like that.
I also, just while we're looking at this, I'd like to give an example that I probably used in the past of, before I was on council, they tried to build a playground, and the 7 people on council thought it was like a slam dunk, everyone was gonna love it. And overwhelmingly, you would not believe the survey response was against it. Like, I mean, I think there was only 20% that supported it. So, some of them might seem a little bit like they won't inform us, but I'm looking for responses en masse that surprise me, because I think this board, I feel like we have a pulse on things, but maybe we don't.
So Carolyn, it makes perfect sense to me, but I want to illustrate the point about the responses are not a random sample. They're not, you can't necessarily view them as representative. So if 20%, and I don't want to think about the playground, situation, but if 20% of people said that their number one issue was visible patrol presence, that doesn't mean 20% of borough residents think
No.
that. So, I actually, Uri's comment about reading everything, because we're not going to get, 50,000 of these. We don't have that many residents. Maybe it's a nice idea to put in, like your first question, how important is it to you that Yardley has a local independent police department? Put your answer and give a space for people to write something. Explain.
Yep. More short form responses.
Yeah, you might, since you're going to read every one of them anyway, that might give you a better sense of what people are really saying.
I'd also say that I kind of reject survey responses if the representative data set is too small. So if we get a really low response, I wouldn't even look at it until I go out and I go door to door and have people respond. Like, I think we should do the work to get the data here. Community feedback time and time again throughout this process is like, we need to be guided by the community. We need to be guided by the community. So I wouldn't really rest in, and no, it would never be representative. But if I got 50 responses, I think we can just throw them out really.
I think that if you, sorry,
Yeah.
I think if we put less weight on data collection here, and more on open responses, so
Yeah.
we just get the narrative, because then if you get 20 responses, it actually has value, whereas if you get 20, rankings, what are you going to do with that? And what I want to point out to you, Rami, just that from us being in these seats, whenever a hot button topic comes up, we get the most passionate people coming in, right? This has the potential to reach a different group that's not passionate enough or able to come in here. So it works in conjunction with that. But I think the narrative in this case is more useful. And we should just make sure we're leaving space for that, because it would be unfortunate if somebody just checks boxes and doesn't write anything.
I'll sprinkle more in.
Because we're not going to learn much.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dan?
Try
Yeah.
to use neutral wording too,
Okay.
that doesn't presuppose an outcome.
I also think this exercise isn't about, 75% of our community thinks this or that. It's an opportunity for maybe people who can't come out and don't want to come and speak in front of the board to be able to give that voice, to be able to make their points just like they would if they were sitting here. And I would expect us to treat it as the same as if someone showed up here to speak at public comment. So I'm not so concerned about the accuracy of the poll, because I don't think that's the purpose of this. I think this is, hey, we want your feedback. Please give it to us.
I like that. Thank you. All right. Yes, David?
I just wanted to say I agree with Dan, and I'm sorry, just pulling from my experience, but when I do,
It's not as important with this meeting, and he also just had his hips replaced, so I'm letting him sit back there. Go ahead. I'll reiterate, yes.
oh, okay, I can speak louder. So what I was saying was, what I think Dan's saying is, sure, having, numbers and such that are empirical are great, if they're even empirical, which I doubt, but having ethnographic, or using ethnographic methodology where you're actually hearing a narrative, whether, and I know that, I think I heard someone say, we'll cut back on the long-term, long-ended questions, but sometimes that's important because then you get a better or fuller picture of that person and their life in the community and their interactions. And I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, so that's Councilperson David Applebaum from the audience is just saying that he agrees with Dan Moen that, getting the narrative feedback is useful and differing viewpoints. It's not as empirical is not the only thing here, and that he supports having more short or long form responses, not just selecting or checking boxes.
Well, they may answer multiple questions at the same time.
Yep, sure. All right, next page. So this, I was kind of an exercise in trying to, this was, I think, the first time we met, Dan, you said, let's ask them some really specifics into like things that could happen or what do they really care about. So this was my attempt to do that. They might do that in short form if you ask the right leading question, but I find a lot of people just want to be led a little bit. So I don't know, Rami, how you feel about this one, because these are certainly leading questions, but.
Yeah, I mean, you're asking, I mean, you have, I mean, I think rightly framed it as, in this scenario, what would you like or not like? Or if, in another scenario, what would you not like or not like? And I think that's like, sort of like Dan was just saying, if you aren't able to come to the meetings, then this is a way for you to give individual resident feedback about some scenarios. The difficulty is it's hard to describe the scenario in a one-sentence way.
I mean, I like this set of questions in that it's probing, and that it makes people stop and think about, hey, we would love to have 30 police officers roaming around the borough, but what's the other side of that, right? What is the cost of that? So I think these questions, I mean, I'm not English is my first language, but I'm not a really good writer, so I don't know the wording, but I like the approach that you're doing here.
Also, 11 and 12, I think, are not, I mean, to me, they're not especially problematic, but 13 and 14, you have concrete numbers, and that's sort of ice pick point in time. It's not, like you were saying earlier, about bending the curve for the future, and anything you do, not just this, but a lot of things in life, if you want more, you pay more. And if you accept less, then you also pay less, and you use your money for something else. And I don't know if that I mean, if you just ask someone straight up, would you like to have more? The answer is almost always going to be, well, sure, why not?
Yeah.
If you don't attach a price tag to it.
I just a thought for number 13. You'd be surprised how many people don't know what they know what they pay, but they don't know what it goes to.
Yeah.
I would maybe say $800 per year in borough property taxes. In parentheses, it says the currently are the average, but maybe it should say like excluding school taxes and county taxes, so that they understand it's just the borough portion.
And that's per house or per person?
Per household.
Per residence,
property.
right, per property, right?
Okay, that's a great point. All right, any other changes here? Is there one more at the bottom? Yeah, or a couple more. Oh, 2 16s.
It makes it sound like there's a plan or an analysis, I should say, not a plan. There's an analysis about reducing costs to, and what kind of service change might be necessary. And I think what we've been talking about, at least as I understand it, has been about reducing growth in costs more than trying to reduce current costs. Have I misunderstood that?
I don't think we're saying it one or the other. I think we're saying our job is to research all this stuff and kind of lay it out. In the end, costs will either be reduced or they won't be reduced. I don't know that that's something that we want to that we're going to decide, right?
I agree with you
Yeah.
completely on that. It's just, if you ask a question about, to me, these questions sound like you could get a refund if we reduced the cost. And I don't think that's ever been within the realm of possibilities.
Right. It's not reduction. Because it's kind of like, this is like the corresponding one to number 13, right? But 13 is how much are you willing to pay more?
Would you be willing to pay more if,
But maybe we want to find out if people say, no, I would like to save. Are you saying, like maybe it turns out that there is an option, and you want to know, are people willing to accept less services for paying less?
I'm looking at 15. Imagine that we were to maintain local policing, but adjust coverage or staffing to reduce costs. I think what maybe was intended is adjust it to reduce growth in costs. Is that right, or is that not right?
No, that was just like if we
Absolute
cut
reduction.
some full-time officers. I mean, I don't think anyone's proposing that, but.
Right, okay.
Do we want to take 14 out? Do we feel like, I agree, I don't know that even if we found a way to save $200,000, we would be cutting, I can't promise that, but someone could maybe believe that if they read that question. Do we?
I mean, it seems doubtful that we are going to
Right.
find that. Like,
So-
that's not the problem we're having, right? Like,
So maybe change that wording so that it's more like, if we were successful in reducing the current cost or future increases.
You could change number 13 and add one level that said decrease. I would be willing to trade police services for a decrease in cost or something. Just to
Okay.
kind of,
And then just take 14 out?
Just to,
Also, Dan.
It's a long one,
seems
so I'm
silly.
fine with getting
Dan, you
rid
did a
of it.
lot of the work. I mean, there were some boroughs that had like, I guess it was only state police coverage or something like
Yeah,
that.
but we're not.
Yes.
Did they have like lower costs? Is that,
Well, yes, they don't pay anything right now. Yeah.
I
Yeah, there are bills in Harrisburg to charge municipalities that use the state police.
Yep.
But just as an antidote, my wife has a job now in Pennsburg, and someone broke into their museum, and they are covered by the state police. And they showed up and made sure everything was secure, and then they left. So, they're not, they're really about, they're not going to be patrolling the municipality for sure.
Nor does it sound like a detective service.
so, one
They
thought.
did show up the next week to follow up on it. They did it that weekend, though, they couldn't really do anything, right?
This is sort of like just processing a recent event, but we had that break-in that happened on Delaware Avenue, and then the person was caught because
They came back for more.
they came back, but our police was on it, right? And I think that was an interesting situation, because I was thinking about the context of that in this group. Where does that live on this survey? In other words, does that make sense? In other words,
No.
okay.
I'm not following.
Okay,
Sorry.
what I mean is, are we collecting the importance of that kind of thing? What would somebody who that mattered to, what would they be answering here that would look different than somebody that said,
I think that,
she had that, I think, in one of the earlier questions, there was, how, it was a rank order question about the different types of services and how
Okay, so that's what I'm-
I think that would fall into that.
the one that you added one to,
that one?
you
with the
added
list? Okay.
traffic stops and calming, so we could add something specific to that. Or they
Is
could
it
put
already
it, we're
there?
adding in one of the short form responses. They could talk about what's been important to them lately in the first page.
Community police being in control, what do you call that? How would you characterize what was done there? Because it was, I think, something that's unique to a small police force, which,
I know what
Well,
you're saying.
you know
I'd
what I
have to, I'd have to play around with it a little bit, but
Yeah.
I'll make these
Just a thought,
represent
you
that.
know.
Yeah. Okay. So, it's a little wonky how we work as a committee with, council has to approve this. So I could attempt to, council doesn't have these questions, but I could attempt to, see if they're comfortable with a survey that we drafted being sent out. We'd like it to go out as soon as possible, though. So does that, with the changes discussed, does that sound like a good plan? Move this one
Maybe
along?
just put a final question, is there anything else you want to share, or just something like a catch-all?
Yep.
Gotcha. That's good.
David?
How did you know?
I hear you going,
So, to Ori's point, and to say, really great things about our own police force, I find and learn about the successes that many people in the community don't know about. And what I think you're talking about in my world is customer service. And I think that, and I'm trying to word this in a way that, even though it may not have anything to do with this survey, moving forward, I'd like to see you toot your horn a little bit more. Because the only way that people will know about the great things that you do, that as long as you can speak to it, is by public relations and letting people know, not bragging, but you know what I'm saying. The thing that happened that Ori spoke about was amazing. I happen to know the person who lives there, He was thrilled. That's great customer service, and people should know that, and that has value.
Thank you, appreciate that. We are pretty great.
agreed.
But that officer specifically, I'd just like to say real quick, that was Officer Boudet who made that arrest. He's our newest full-timer, and I think he did a great job. He was regularly patrolling that house all night, and I don't want to speak too much about it because it's an ongoing investigation, but great work on his part. And, that's the kind of thing that we can do as a small-town department. Like, if the people of Yardley Borough were relying on PSP and Trevos, they're not going to be having an officer checking a house all night,
Yep, very good point. Thank you. Okay, so I'm clear. I'll discuss with council at our next meeting. We are getting close to coming up on time here. The hour went quickly tonight. I did also send a community update. I will say that it was drafted a month ago, so I would just make some changes to the meat of what we've accomplished as a committee, since some of that has moved along further. Otherwise, did anyone have any changes to that? It would go out in one of our email blasts. Okay.
Assuming this is approved.
Yep.
How would this be fielded, and how would, who would get it, or how
We
would
would
they get
start
it?
by using the Yardley Borough email blast list, which has 800 and some respondents. And we can tell if they're residents or non-residents. You can be on the email list and just be like a business owner or somebody who likes to keep in touch. So we'd obviously want to look at that. And then I'd also be open to going around and delivering QR codes to people's mailboxes. I can do that. I think that's important because you get some people who maybe aren't on the list or weren't going to respond. Gives them a little extra pressure. All right. Shared services. Dan, you already gave an update to us. Anything else you'd like to add?
I don't. Chris, do you have anything to add?
Nope, all good.
Okay. Current police department evaluation. Kim and Corporal Clark, did you meet or have anything?
Well, we did sort out the email situation, so.
I also had that problem for 5 years, and I finally said, I thought I just wasn't allowed. It was a security something to email the officers. It's only certain ones, I think it's the distribution
Yeah,
list.
I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, Bailey had to fix it.
So-
Well, that's good. I'm glad you can talk now.
But yeah, we're working on the numbers.
Okay.
We'll map that out.
Sure.
And then the last thing was just, I had in the agenda, the financial review, there was some good conversation at our last meeting about, we're just looking at status quo with inflation projections. What could we plug into your subcommittee so that you could do other financial exercises that we've talked about tonight? So,
Well, I guess there's a lot of things I suppose could be done, but the thing I was thinking of is when we have some specific alternatives that are being contemplated or evaluated, then we can try to analyze those in comparison. But to my knowledge, at least right now, we don't have any specific alternatives to contemplate. But when we do.
but if you could send any any probing questions for, I know that we don't have anything concrete right now, but as we're meeting, we're going to meet with the police department, Dan's going to meet with other chiefs, like any questions that you would specifically want asked that would help you during that process down the road, that I think that would be helpful.
Well, there certainly are such questions. I suspect they're probably obvious to people because the questions are going to be, essentially, what does that cost? How often would you expect to renegotiate that?
Yep.
What are the drivers of your own projected changes over time? Because I would think that anybody would be engaging in any kind of a shared service arrangement must have financial projections of their own. Because we don't want to be sort of blindsided by something that, maybe it appears desirable in the first year or two, but then becomes undesirable later. And that may be a little less evident when you only talk about, well, what would it cost right now?
Yeah, and are they going to be honest with things like that? Because, before contracting,
Well,
are those things really controlled?
so in terms of honesty, I can't speak to that.
Sure, no, I wasn't asking you to, I'm just,
But I would say that there are probably internal financial projections that are used for budgeting. And if you get people's actual budget projections, unless they have two sets of books, that's going to be their own thinking. It's not just what someone casually says in a meeting. If it's something that we're serious about to get to that point. So getting those budget projections would be desirable if they're willing to provide those.
It's going to be public information, so.
I don't know how much is it all public?
Projections, depends if they're, to what extent they're making them, if they're doing what you did,
Yeah.
or if they're just looking at it year by year.
Well, they must have multi-year contracts for some things.
Yeah, they know those parts, yeah.
Well, and I think the question that might be asked is, how long an agreement would you be expecting with us? Because we don't want a one-year agreement either. In my opinion, we want some more confidence of stability than you would get with a one-year agreement. But, how long a term would give, them the ability to invest their time and energy and us the confidence that we have something stable.
We have to control for the risk of a bait and switch, which, like they'll take a loss leader for 3 years and then bump it up and then,
I have trouble envisioning a municipality doing a loss leader.
Yeah,
But
but-
maybe, I don't know.
But there may be, in a competitive environment, a willingness to kind of strain resources a bit
Yeah.
to win a client,
okay, anything else from the table this week before we open for public comment? Does everybody know what they're working on before our next meeting? Don't want any idle committee members here. All right, public comment this evening. Would anyone like to approach Mr. Carlson?
Very fast. This is really for you, Dan, or whoever's going to reach out to other organizations. One thing that would be good to ask them is, when I look at all the expenses outside of personnel, vehicles is up there. Imagine a world where we say, we don't need 5 cars, we need 3 cars, but we need access to 2 other cars. When one breaks down, or one's used, one's tied up over in Doylestown at court, et cetera. And if you had an arrangement with another entity that could work both ways, maybe they could get rid of a couple of cars too, because if they needed, they could borrow one of ours if we had to. In other words, something like that where, because we're on this cycle of buying cars every couple of years, and it's probably the next biggest chunk of money after personnel-related stuff. So see if, it might be something to ask them. They might bite on that. So I just might do something worthwhile.
Radios were expensive
Or
also.
radio, yeah, yeah, that's true, they are, but.
Thank you. Any other public comment this evening? All right, thank you, everyone. We'll adjourn at 7:21.